maybe something like this. Okay. So, hello, my name is David Gerard, and I would like to welcome one and all to my 4th podcast of poems, stories, and song. Normally, Dave co-hosts, but he's nowhere to be found. Oh well, his loss. I think the name of this week's podcast is The Pod Couple. The name may continue to change weekly until I actually settle on a name. Maybe something like Sodcast, Oddcast, Fraudcast, or Odd Sodscast. I must apologize also for initially sending the invitations out with the wrong date. So if you're listening now, you got it. But if you're listening tomorrow, fear not, as you can go to my Facebook page to watch the rerun. So a shout out to everyone for their efforts to keep COVID-19 at bay. I watched Stronger Together, and I thought it was rather ironic that most of the Canadians singing it live in the States. It just seemed odd. The music was good, and the awareness and promotion of the food banks was awesome. I didn't take kindly to being told ad nauseum to wash my hands. I'm quite capable of forgetting to wash my hands all by myself. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to do another little thing here that may improve things for me. Got so much stuff now all over the place. Let's try this. I want to get the other monitor down so I can actually really see it. Okay, done like dinner. So where are we? Oh yeah. So here's an intro to one of my poems, and it's kind of one of my favorite poems, I guess, in a way, and it's one that I wrote a few years back. So a few years ago, my 4 sisters and I got together for 3 days of sibling reunion in James Bay, Victoria, BC. It was wonderful to have some of our children drop in from time to time. Janice and Jocelyn, 2 of my 4 sisters, had the honorable distinction of traveling the furthest, as they came from the remote outpost of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. My sister Paulette had the dubious distinction as the only sibling from Vancouver Island. She traveled from Nanaimo downhill all the way, obviously, as she was traveling north to south on a wall map, and she had to navigate only one small speed bump called the Malahat to then coast the rest of the way to Victoria. On the other hand, Carolyn and I had an arduous journey beginning in the tiny village of Vancouver and had to navigate past many streetlights and a barrage of cars being driven as though they were in the city. Next were HOV lanes with typical cars and drivers, some carrying odd-looking prototypical mannequins or large dolls in the front passenger seat. Shortly thereafter, we entered that dimly lit claustrophobic tunnel under the river. Thanks to my superior navigation skills, we didn't take any wrong turns in the tunnel. Not bad. Next was a ride on the ferry, taking a nap and wondering if you're going to wake up to discover you've run aground in Victoria's Inner Harbor. But we did dock at the right place and made our way without incident to meet up with the others. I think it's blatantly obvious that we should have been dubbed the most courageous, as we had to battle through trial and tribulation and summon up the courage to take a trip from a tiny village to a booming metropolis in less than one day. Anyhow, we had a great time and enjoyed traveling on foot as much as possible to see how many things had changed, but in some ways, through their familiarity, appeared unchanged. I was inspired by this experience to write a poem called Arterial Flow that's about resolute familial love and the reluctant acceptance of our mortality. Just going to quickly look at the Codcast, Jocelyn said. Podcast, Jocelyn again. Okay, I just happened to check Facebook and found you on and thought I was losing my memory fast. Godcast, Modcast, Nodcast. Yeah, I really like that one. Haha, tiny village of Vancouver. Okay, so I'll get on to the, one sec. Onto the poem itself. So, as I probably already mentioned, oops, the other one. The name of the poem is Arterial Flow. Come along for a cruise on the anhydrous sea to see how being human is the freeway of connectivity. Countless lanes pave the history of all. Can't look back in the mirror, just ahead with two eyes on the road or wake up dead. All lanes in the same direction seems odd to me. No lights, no signs to guide this ride. No rush, just cruise to flow and let go. In the vortex of traffic's constant pace, instead of round in circles, we're going straight. To where? Numerous lanes of change move right out of sight. I take off-ramp to the service road with no name for a trip away from the freeway of destiny, to reunite and reminisce with the remnants of youthful minds. Collectively are we 5 siblings of the orphan age, far past time of hardcore grief once shared, sometimes not. No rush, just cruise to flow and let go. Drawn to unite as one work on canvas bright, a pentalogy masterpiece together, individual works of art when apart. Deja vu embrace stronger and longer than ever, despite a deficit of 2 to the other side. Rendezvous inspired refrain, let's do it again. Time to go, so I accelerate slow beyond the on-ramp to emerge in traffic flow tears of gratitude. For the precious time together, we'll meet again when? Hope to reunite as 5 siblings, less perhaps 1 or 2. If this be the case, familial embrace shall grow in magnitude. Thanks to those on the other side. No rush, just cruise to flow and let go. At a leisurely pace, we diverge to separate lanes in a human race to coast for most of the way. Though obscured from each other, we 5 drive parallel in the same direction to truth, not deception. In a freeway funk, sober, not drunk, but under the influence of wherewithal. Increasing velocity sensed from deep within, Am I going faster on the road to disaster? Brake to slow, then let go for speed to grow. I've crested the peak to realize I'm now over the hill. No rush, just cruise to flow and let go. I cannot see, tears have blinded me. Kindred spirits together or apart, we will merge again on this side or the other. Though we are yet human, most of the race is done. Speed limit is coast between respites brief on a one-way trip littered in vain attempts to gain control. The time is now to greet passenger seat. Like the ocean tide, can't stop this ride, glide downhill to the other side. No rush, just cruise to flow and let go. So I'll look at a few comments here before I get going because I'm really bad. I'm very delinquent with that. So Nodcast, haha, tiny bit. Oh yeah, right. And oh, my niece Carolyn Langdon's on as well. So and she says, "You're making me cry." Well, it wasn't meant to make cry. It's one of those things. You wait till you get ancient, like your uncle and aunts and mom and dad, and there'll be a certain amount of acceptance to those kind of things, I guess. I'm going to go over it quickly. Let's see, stuff that might be a little bit confusing. Oh, anhydrous means dry. So come along for a cruise on the anhydrous sea to sea, sea as an ocean. So it's a dry ocean, which is actually the freeway. A lot of it's kind of self-explanatory. Oh yeah, collectively are we 5 siblings of the orphan age. Our parents had both passed away prior to that, so I like to, use it, for sympathy, when I talk to people. I'm an orphan. But, yeah, look at that, it's the same thing. But drawn to unite as one work on canvas bright, a pentalogy masterpiece together, individual works of art when apart. Kind of like that one because a pentalogy is any work of art that's composed of 5 different works of art, right? And so the 5, separately they're their own works of art, but they're also together they're one big work of art. Not that we're pieces of art or anything, but yeah, there's that. And accelerate slow. Yeah, that's it. Oh, hold on. Yeah, I think the rest of it's self-explanatory. Yeah, Jocelyn, I so like this. You have some very lucky siblings. I have some very lucky siblings. Okay, now this piece it's a little lengthy. I might try and go a little faster than normal to try and get through it, but one sec here. The main character, and this is just an old sweetheart who's, she's passed away years ago, but anyhow. In 1964, when I was at the ripe old age of 7, we moved to Salt Spring Island. Our new house was on Walker Road, situated between the Hook and Fernwood Wharf on the northeast shore of the island. We lived there for just over 1 year and then moved into a big new house. A big new old house on Ganges Hill. It had 5 bedrooms. So I had a bedroom to myself, and there were 2 or 3 bathrooms. I can't remember. So I actually got to see what the inside of a bathroom really looked like. 4 sisters, yeah. A year later, we moved to the booming metropolis of Ganges to live on a 5-acre piece of property with access from Rainbow Road and Kanaka Road. On the property was a new, old 2-bedroom house. Mom and Dad in 1 bedroom, my older sisters in the attic bedroom, and me and my twin sisters in the laundry room. And guess what? There was only 1 bathroom. The year is 1966, which would make me a strapping 9-year-old at that time. Many years later, Gulf Island Secondary School would be built on this property. I was the one who usually, picked up the mail on Rainbow Road, and directly across the road was a mailbox with a farm in the background. One day, a nice lady was getting mail and introduced herself as Violet Murakami. It was normally Violet who picked up Murakami's mail. Sometime later, I went to get the mail, but this time there was a different lady standing across the road, somewhat older, with a friendly face and a gentle and kind disposition. She was not very tall, and even at that age, I may have been taller than her, as she was definitely shorter than 5 feet and taller than 4 feet. And she introduced herself as Mrs. Murakami. So, Mrs. Murakami, Violet's mother. We began talking, and she asked me, "Have you ever picked berries?" I said, "Yes, I've picked, blackberries, thimbleberries, salmon berries, huckleberries, and wild strawberries. But I always ate the strawberries because they tasted the best and were very hard to find and very small." She said, "Oh, that's a lot of berries. You must have made lots of money." I replied, "No money, but I got to eat lots of jam and pies." She said, "Why don't you pick berries for me? Raspberries and strawberries. I will pay you money." "Okay," I replied. She said, "In a few weeks, I will give you a call." And wouldn't you know it, in a few weeks, I was working at my first job. Mrs. Murakami, I see Jacqueline's there too. Nice. Mrs. Murakami would teach green berry pickers not to pick green berries, if that makes sense to you, or overripe berries, and to be sure not to miss any berries. She or Mr. Murakami would sometimes check the row behind us pickers. Mr. and Mrs. Murakami's daughter, Mary, and her 4-year-old son, Landon, used to stay with the Murakamis in the summertime. It didn't take long before Landon began to emulate Grandma and Grandpa, as I saw him behind me, walking important with his hands behind his back and checking to see if I'd left any berries behind. I pretended that I didn't see him and waited until he got close, then turned quickly and yelled, "Boo!" And he just took off like a shot and ran away. And I didn't see him for the rest of the day, but it didn't take him long to sort of catch on, and eventually he would laugh instead of running away. Little bugger. He was a good kid, actually. I'm quite sure it was him who would walk around naming all the different kinds of dinosaurs and facts about them. 3 of my sisters also picked berries, and the one thing I remember is them teasing me about Mrs. Murakami calling me Dabe. And sometimes she would say, "Dabe, you good belly picker." And they give me a hard time about it, but tell you the honest truth, I didn't mind at all. I worked for the Murakamis for the next 3 summers and got to have a great appreciation for them as wonderful and kind people, and I now feel fortunate that they were the first to teach me good work habits. Afterwards, when I saw Mrs. Murakami, I would always say, "Hi, Mrs. Murakami," and she would respond with, "Hi, Dave." I'm just going to look at the comments here really quick. Jack's here. Paulette's here. Oh, that's good. I got some family here. Anyhow, Jacqueline about the debut belly picker. Okay, now let's step back into time to 1904 when Kimiko Okano became the first Japanese Canadian born in Steveston, BC. By the age of 5, she was piloting the family boat from Vancouver all the way back to the family farm on Salt Spring Island, waking her father up in time for him to pilot the boat to the dock. So obviously it was Z time for her father to get Z's. A couple of years later, Kimiko's younger sister fell off the boat and tragically drowned, but they weren't allowed to bury her on Salt Spring Island because of the Japanese. They just weren't treated very well at all. So instead, they went to the mainland. While they were away in Vancouver for her funeral, they got word that a suspicious fire had destroyed the family houseboat and part of the herring camp they were running at the time. Some years later, Kimiko became the first woman to drive on Salt Spring Island. She bought a 3/4-ton truck, and I wonder how she could even see over the steering wheel and reach the pedals to shift gears. Another sip here, sorry. The year is now 1941, and Kimiko Okano Murakami is married to Katsuyori Murakami, and they have 5 children. Of the 7 members of the Murakami family, Mr. Murakami was the only one not born in Canada. There were a total of 77 Japanese Canadians on Salt Spring Island when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, and I guess mostly it was people fueled by paranoia more than anything that triggered the Canadian government and most of its citizens to turn on their fellow Canadians. Katsuyori was taken into custody in March of 1942, and 1 month later, Kimiko and the children, along with other Japanese Canadians, were taken by ship to Vancouver and transported to the animal barns at Hastings Park. This is an excerpt taken from Mary's story, written by Mary Kitagawa, who is Mrs. Murakami's daughter and Landon's mother. Yeah. When the Pacific War began, like other people of Japanese origin, we became prisoners of the Canadian government. My father was taken away from us like a common criminal, and mother was left with 5 children aged 1 to 14. Fear enveloped our lives because we did not know what was going to happen to us. We were now labeled enemy aliens, and our civil rights were taken away. We were not allowed to attend church or school. Mother was permitted to go shopping, but otherwise we were not allowed to leave our property. And at this time, they're still on Salt Spring. Yeah. A month after father disappeared into a void, the 72 remaining Japanese Canadian people were sent by boat to Vancouver. And she's in parentheses, she says 4 other men were taken away at the same time as father. We were herded into a very large animal barn at Hastings Park. where they had thousands of army bunk beds, and we slept. Sorry, I'm just going to remove this here. Thousands of army bunk beds and animal stalls for us to sleep in. The pungent smell of animal urine and feces permeated our daily existence. We must have been the first wave of prisoners gathered in this holding center. The straw was not yet stuffed into the bags that were to have been our mattresses. Instead, loose straw was scattered on the bunks, and we slept on it covered by 2 gray army blankets. Toilets were troughs with water running constantly through it. Lime was sprinkled all over to cover up the smell, but it did not help. Unpalatable, unfamiliar food fed to us at the mess halls caused hundreds of people to get diarrhea and food poisoning. We stayed in this hell for 1 month, and then were sent by train to Greenwood, an abandoned mining town. There we were put into very old, dirty, abandoned buildings that once housed miners. The women and girls had to clean the interior to make it livable. We had to sleep on the floors in a small cubicle and cook our own food in a cramped communal kitchen. Life was very difficult, especially for the mothers who were forced into the role of single parenthood. The children had no school, but did attend activities created by the Catholic nuns. This was just the first 2 months of a journey of suffering and hardship that began in 1942 and lasted until they returned in 1954. That's 12 years. Richard, the youngest child, was less than 2 years old when the journey began, so that he would make him 14, a young teenager with very little idea of what normal is. When they finally arrived back on Salt Spring, they had to start. This is me that wrote this bit here. They had to start a second time from scratch because their property had been taken and sold during their absence. That's when they purchased the Rainbow Road property, but as soon as they returned, so did the discrimination, hatred, and vandalism. Mrs. Murakami did not want to return, but Mr. Murakami did. My guess is that he wanted to be close to his first son, Ryochi, who had died in 1933 at the age of 9 months and was buried on Salt Spring Island. It was his and Mrs. Murakami's child. I would just like to say that I glossed over the incarceration years for the sake of brevity, and in no way, shape, or form should it be considered a sign of disrespect. I'm just going to stop for a second here to see what's on. Well, Steve Powell, they used to say to Steve Menzies, "You crazy kid. Why you pick all the green ones?" Steve was a Salt Springer as well. They lived up Rainbow Road. Jocelyn, I was a slow but thorough raspberry picker. Carolyn was sometimes a scatter picker. One day I was picking a row back to back with Carolyn. I went on a break. Just then Mr. Murakami came along. So Carolyn popped over to my row he checked my row, thinking it was her row, and said, "Belly good." He then checked her row, thinking it was my row, shaking his head sadly, and he said, "Belly bad, belly bad." Hi, Myra. Myra says hi. Steve Pell said there's a documentary on Mrs. Murakami. Yeah, there's tons of stuff. Rose wrote a book, and I was listening to a lot of audio tapes to glean some information from them. Hey, Dave Shimman, it's Darren Berger from Edmonton. I used to work with him in places like Kazakhstan and Siberia. And Maya Grippick said, "Is that something you can share?" I don't quite understand that. I have to go, but of course I can share it. Carolyn Langdon, I can picture walking over to Murakami's place and something. Oh, I lost it. Okay, anyhow, here we go again. Oh, another sip of water first. Mrs. Murakami is the first person of Asian ancestry to have her image printed on a North American banknote. It's an uncirculated $100 Salt Spring dollar bill with artwork. Thinking Like a Mountain on the reverse side by Robert Bateman, and featuring one of the pioneering matriarchs of the island, Kimiko Murakami. Her photograph was taken by Islander Barbara Woodley, and it now hangs in the National Archives in Ottawa. I have connections with that banknote. First of all, it's the largest denomination with a value of 100, and I feel connected to that. But also, I knew the lady on the front, the photographer who captured her portrait, and the artist on the back. So that's kind of interesting. I knew Barbara from school, and she was 2 or 3 years younger than me. And Barbara also took the famous, or perhaps infamous, portrait of Kim Campbell. I met Robert Bateman and his wife when I helped a friend, Steve, to build him a small Y2K bunker meant to house a generator and a few other things. After the concrete had cured, we chipped away at it to make it blend in with the landscape, which is Robert Bateman's sort of sensitivity to the environment. Previously, Steve had built a house for the otters so they wouldn't crawl under the big house. And it makes good sense, because if you have otters under your house, the stench of rotten fish is nauseating. Mrs. Murakami counted BC Premier W.A.C. Bennett and broadcast legend Jack Webster among her friends and admirers, both of whom would regularly drop by her Salt Spring home to visit and seek counsel. The thing I remember most about Wacky Bennett is going to his place on Sunset Drive when we were on bottle drives. Jackpot every time. Lots of empty booze bottles with some pop bottles sprinkled in. Jack Webster had a farm, probably to keep his property taxes down, on the way up to Mount Maxwell, where Old Divide Road meets Cranberry Road. When he was in town, it wasn't unusual for him to be heard before he was seen. I was unfortunate enough to be on the ferry more than once to hear Wacky and Jackie in rather boisterous debate. Fortunately, the ferries allow you to distance yourself, and if that doesn't work, just go outside. The Murakamis were the only Japanese Canadians to return to the Gulf Islands, which is remarkable. Mrs. Murakami's motto was forgive, but don't forget. Their accomplishments and contributions to the community were many, and here are a few of them. They donated funds to help build a new school. This was probably 1930 or something like that. At Central Cemetery, they replaced the wooden markers on the Japanese graves with headstones. A scholarship was started in their name. They donated trees to Central Park. They donated the property for Murakami Gardens, which was, that's expensive. Which is the gardens, which is housing for low-income people. Because Richard had talked to a lot of, even people that were working for him and other people, and they were moving off the island. A lot of them were old timers, or old time island people, because they couldn't afford to live on the island. Education was very important to Mr. and Mrs. Murakami. 4 of the children went to university. Richard graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree. Rose graduated from VGH School of Nursing in 1959 and obtained a BSN from UBC and Masters of Science degrees from McGill University and Boston University. She had a long career at the UBC School of Nursing as an associate professor, where she was highly respected, where she was highly respected and had a successful career as vice president of nursing at UBC Health Sciences Center. In 1994, she became RNABC's, whatever that is, first consumer relations representative. I would imagine the RN's for registered nurse, at least. Mary Kitagawa began her teaching career at Kitsilano Secondary School, and the reason she began it there was because they would not allow her to teach on Salt Spring, which for her was tragic at the time, but in hindsight, it was a good thing for her, just to get away from the place. Where was I? Yes, and enrolled in the University of British Columbia. In 2011, Mary successfully advocated UBC to gift the 76 Japanese Canadian students who were forced out of UBC following the attack of Pearl Harbor honorary degrees. She was later the recipient of the 2013 Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. In 2018, Mary received the Order of British Columbia for her activism efforts for Japanese Canadians. Not bad for, a family like theirs that was always trying to, scrimp and save and whatever. So they really figured that obviously that education was a big thing. Okay, the following is an excerpt taken from a chapter of Salt Spring, The Story of an Island by Charles Kahn. There's a cemetery behind Central Hall with a Japanese-Canadian section. When the Murakamis returned to Salt Spring, this Japanese section was overrun with brambles and strewn with garbage, and all the grave markers had been destroyed or removed. Katsuyori Murakami began a labor of love reconstructing the markers and positioning them beside the graves as he had remembered them, and he remembered them. That's what's crazy. The markers are unadorned, simply bearing the name of each person's name, surname first in the Japanese fashion. They commemorate a time when a small community of Japanese Canadians made their homes on Salt Spring Island. When Kimiko Murakami died in July 1997, her passing was marked by a community celebration. More than 250 islanders filled Ganges United Church to overflowing to participate in the passing of a remarkable woman whose life reflected the Japanese experience on Salt Spring. Kimiko had been part of the fishing and farming community, had transcended the horrors of the internment, thought it was internet, internment period, and had once again become a central part of the community in which she spent most of her life. A wide cross-section of Salt Spring society sang "We'll Sing in the Sunshine," one of Kimiko's favorite songs, and the reception afterwards became an old-timers reunion, signaling the end of an unhappy period in island history. What's crazy is that for decades, I didn't know what had really happened to the Murakamis. Most people wouldn't talk about it. Perhaps they didn't want to have to deal with the embarrassment and shame. So I'll try and sing part of that song. I'm really dry right now. I don't know if I can get the verse right, but that's the one. We'll sing in the sunshine. We'll sing in the sunshine. We'll laugh every day. We'll sing in the sunshine. Then I'll be on my way. I will never love you. The cost of love's too dear. But though I'll never love you, I'll stay with you 1 year. And we can sing in the sunshine. We'll laugh every day. We'll sing in the sunshine. Then I'll be on my way. So that's that. I don't know the whole song. Okay, there's something here that I would. Is Jocelyn still here? I wonder. She's still on. I don't know if I know how I can tell, but anyhow, this is sort of near the wrapping up section of it. The reason I asked Jocelyn was there, and I'll find out later, I guess, but is that it's a poem that I wrote for her a while ago that is, it seems very relevant in the times we live in right now, you know, with the COVID thing, called Nurse's Pay. Her job skills are prototypical, but one is exemplary as she rocks the charts when it comes to TLC. She's a nurse and she's okay. Been at it for 40 years and still gets paid. In long hours of brutal shift work and patients testing patients, testing the patients of caregivers, visitors, and other patients. Now that one you have to really read to understand. When humor becomes a waif and her world gradually fades, she turns to meditation and prayer. Is anybody there? Deep within the cerebral abyss, the sense of déjà vu persists, as she finds and enters the vault of recompense to discover its hidden riches. Though nary a whiff of tangible value resides inside the core of her gray matter of fact. Instead, she finds a peace of mind, nursing those cherished memories that foster peace of mind as her world gradually brightens, so that once again she has the vision to see what allows her to be a good nurse. Thank you, smiles and laughter from infants to the elderly, and the odd bare bum too. Her hugs, smiles, and giggles from coworkers. Hugs, smiles, and giggles from coworkers, family, and friends of patients. Nurses' pay works both ways. She's a nurse and she's okay. And that's that. So, I wonder why I'm not getting some messages on the other computer and then on this. Just give me a, whoops. I think I'm still on. Oh, yeah. I just want to look at these. Alexis says, where can we find the documentary? And I'm not really sure on Murakami's. It might be, there's one that they did like a film on DVD, but it's not widely available. Carolyn Langdon says, I had no idea about any of this. They were so humble and modest, and yes, they were. Carolyn Langdon, she is here. Oh, Jocelyn's still here. Okay, good. Paulette, very touching tribute to the Murakamis, Dave. So, yeah, I guess that's it in a nutshell. And I'm kind of burnt out because I was trying to get things working. And I'm sure that I will even try to do a live video next week before this starts to make sure, completely sure that things work. So thanks for listening to me. And I hope you didn't mind that I pulled it off today instead of waiting. I would have had to wait for next week, actually, because tomorrow evening I've got choir practice online. So anyhow, love you all and peace out.